GE confirming just now it is cutting 12,000 jobs as it shrinks its power.
Well, we've been talking to customers throughout the weekend here at IATA about the U.S. trade policies. We think we've got about a $500 million residual cost challenge.
What was heralded as a measure to safeguard American jobs is now degenerating into unanticipated repercussions. Tariffs intended to protect homegrown industries have caused unintended consequences that could destroy manufacturing itself. The question gets bigger as one of America's most recognizable firms retreats. Is this a calculated move to stay afloat in a global marketplace? Or is it the start of the country's industrial backbone gradually collapsing? Silence is replacing the soft hum that previously permeated manufacturing floors in the Northeast and Midwest. General Electric, a longtime representation of American industrial might and ingenuity, has said that it will shut down many facilities and shift a significant amount of its manufacturing elsewhere. The announcement is more than just the loss of a paycheck for the thousands of employees who have centered their lives on these sites. It is the dissolution of a legacy that molded towns, families, and the middle class as a whole. There was never only assembly line work at these plants. They stood for the power of American industry. The consistent cadence of machinery transforming raw resources into turbines, engines, and many other goods that carried the GE name globally. Their closure is not only another business choice. It represents a sea change in the structure of global production and a clear indication of how hard it is now for the U.S. to compete in its current political and economic environment. This is not a stopgap measure, the business has stated. With production moving to Mexico, Eastern Europe, and Southeast Asia, operations are being reorganized for long-term expansion overseas. These areas have governments keen to attract foreign investment, reduced labor costs, and less onerous tariffs. Executives stress that reducing costs is only one aspect of the plan. It involves building a supply chain that is robust enough to endure the geopolitical uncertainties, trade disputes, and inflation that are increasingly upsetting American industry. There is a deeper structural truth below this action. The American industrial base has found it difficult to stay up as foreign nations offer incentives to entice manufacturers. Competitiveness has been undermined by high input costs, strict restrictions, and logistical impediments. Moving overseas gives GE access to more affordable resources, adaptable labor pools, and cutting-edge transportation hubs that facilitate and increase the profitability of production scaling. The broader pattern is evident. Manufacturing is now dispersed throughout the world, grouped where the optimal combination of price and efficiency is available, rather than being restricted to a single country. In addition to its size, GE's deruling is notable for its symbolism. Businesses of all kinds have been progressively moving their production overseas for years. However, when a company as well known as General Electric makes such a move, it serves as a signal for the whole sector. Smaller businesses confront an even more difficult situation if a company with almost a century of expertise, resources, and influence is unable to continue operating in America. Fears that the decline of domestic manufacturing may happen far more quickly than communities and policymakers are ready to deal with have increased as a result of the statement. The impact on nearby villages has been terrible and immediate. Communities that grew up around these plants are currently dealing with the loss of thousands of jobs, declining tax bases, and the ensuing fallout. There are deficits in public services, hospitals, and schools that were formerly financed by industrial revenue. Local governments are rushing to bring in new funding or offer retraining programs. However, recovery is uncertain because of the size of the layoffs. The closures have affected families more deeply than just the economy because they depended on GE for stability across many generations. The pride that came from belonging to something bigger has been taken away by them. A labor force that was once the cornerstone of American manufacturing. The psychological toll has been considerably worse than the financial one for many. No one ever thought of General Electric as just another employer. Its name was entwined with the tale of American tenacity, a tribute to self-control, diligence, and civic pride. Jobs are not the only things that disappear when factory gates close. The idea that business can still prosper under the assurances of governments who support protectionism and tariffs vanishes. The closures raise questions about whether revivalist rhetoric really reflect the hard reality of a global market where supply chains and pricing constraints determine survival. This choice involves more than just moving factories. It's about having the ability and understanding to move with them. Technical procedures, supplier agreements, and decades of accumulated experience are all sent overseas with production lines. Along with equipment, strategic advantage and intellectual capital are also being moved. When these systems are adopted by other nations, they bolster rivals and erode American dominance in sectors deemed essential to national security. It gets more difficult to maintain national self-sufficiency during emergencies when the nation's large-scale industrial capacity declines. This decision was not taken lightly at GE. As executives spent time, several plants had already slowed down or idled. Months of considering options, restructuring production lines, investing heavily in automation, reducing working hours, and renegotiating union contracts were among the options. Each scenario had a forecast, but none of them provided a way to achieve long-term profitability. Although unions made harsh concessions and automation gave short-term increases, the costs of shipping, semiconductors, and steel remained unaffordable. Tariffs intended to safeguard domestic producers actually increased costs and reduced margins to the point where it was almost difficult to stay in the U.S. Other solutions were just as unfeasible. The lack of infrastructure could not be remedied by moving to states with less stringent laws and lower taxes. The scope of the problem was not adequately addressed by federal aid packages, or they included requirements that GE was unable to fulfill across its extensive range of products. Despite the most inventive reorganization, the math would not line up. There was no escaping the conclusion. Sustaining production in the U.S. would result in long-term losses that would jeopardize the company's very existence. This was not a failure of innovation for a company that had survived technical revolutions, depressions, and world wars. It was the breakdown of a working environment that had grown too unfriendly for large-scale production. Rising tariffs, changing supply chains, and worldwide inflation combined to create a force that was too powerful for any one business to withstand. Communities have already been altered by the fallout. Formerly parent-to-child GE job families are now facing unemployment. Hitherto tranquil neighborhoods where the sound of the factory whistle accompanied the daily rhythm. Although they hold emergency meetings, local councils are not equipped to rebuild what has been destroyed. Idle machines and deserted parking lots have taken over the industrial belt scenery. The decrease in aerial footage was documented by the media. Roads are deserted, plants are silent, and employees are packing up their possessions after years of effort. The deeper scars are revealed through interviews. The disintegration of hope, the loss of identity, and the anxiety about the future. The ramifications for policy are as dramatic. GE's withdrawal demonstrates how flimsy the hardline tariff plan that was intended to protect American businesses has become. It has turned out to be foolish to believe that increased consumer pricing and patriotic duty would be sufficient to save domestic manufacturing. Even the most powerful industrial titans are forced to relocate overseas in the absence of a robust framework of long-term investment, training, and infrastructure support. This goes beyond just businesses ignoring their heritage. It is a manifestation of a globalized economic system whose regulations have changed. The statement sparked a quick reaction from the markets. GE's share price faltered and analysts underlined the near-term hazards of demolishing American companies, transferring equipment, and recreating operations in foreign countries. Retraining new employees, adhering to strange legislation, and upholding standards overseas come at a high expense. Investors, however, see the bigger picture despite the chaos. Even if the short-term effects are unpleasant, adapting to the reality of globalization is essential for long-term survival. But different communities have different perspectives on the story. For them, stability, dignity, and means of subsistence are more important than balance sheets and international supply lines. Less money will be earned, fewer local firms will remain open, and the next generation will have less chances as a result of the closures. In a world where production shifts to wherever conditions are most cost-effective and efficient, they raise troubling issues about whether a nation that aspires to become a worldwide leader in manufacturing can still maintain its position. However, a lot of investors are looking ahead, placing bets that General Electric would ultimately benefit from its choice after the new production facilities overseas are fully operating. According to updated financial models, if the corporation were to focus on lowering wages, offering large tax benefits, and streamlining customs procedures in the nations selected for relocation, it could reduce overall costs by almost 1/5. This seems to hedge funds and portfolio managers as a tale of recuperation and revitalized competitiveness, a calculated risk to update an outdated industrial model in the face of domestic inflation and growing input costs. GE is not the only company with that attitude. Similar trends are seen in the flow of global capital toward nations with predictable trade frameworks and stable regulations. Mexico, Poland, and Vietnam have become popular travel destinations, attracting investments from sectors that previously considered the U.S. to be their permanent home. In this regard, GE's move is not a singular change. Rather, it is a component of a larger realignment of industrial power that positions facilities near expanding markets, shortens delivery times, and tailors goods to suit various local needs. This adaptability is especially helpful in domains where local conditions frequently dictate drastically changing requirements, including healthcare technologies and energy systems. If this change doesn't occur, production may keep leaving the country until it loses control over the capabilities that were once thought to be essential to its dominance. What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments. Please subscribe to our channel and hit like. Thank you for viewing.